The studio buzzed with anticipation as the hosts of The View settled into their seats, the audience clapping enthusiastically under the bright stage lights. Whoopi Goldberg kicked things off with her signature charm, introducing the day's guest, Nicolas Cage, whose new action thriller had just hit theaters. The crowd roared as Cage strode out, his trademark intensity evident in his sharp gaze and quick wave. Joy Behar leaned forward, a mischievous glint in her eye, ready to dive into the interview. "Nick, welcome back. Your movie's got explosions, car chases, and you screaming at the top of your lungs, a business as usual, right?" she quipped, drawing laughs. Cage grinned, but his eyes narrowed slightly, sensing the playful jab might lead somewhere else. Whoopi steered the conversation toward his career, asking about his approach to choosing such eclectic roles. Cage leaned back, his voice low and deliberate, explaining how he pours his soul into every performance, no matter the genre. "I don't just act," he said, "I live the character every breath, every heartbeat." The audience nodded, captivated, but Joy wasn't done. She interjected, "Some say you overdo it, though. Like, is all that intensity really necessary?" The crowd murmured, sensing tension. Cage's smile tightened, and he replied, "Joy, art isn't about playing it safe. It's about risk. About feeling something real." The other hosts exchanged glances, and Sunny Hostin jumped in, asking about his preparation for physically demanding roles. Cage described months of training, but Joy cut in again, smirking, "So, what's with the hair? Is that part of the method, too?" Laughter rippled through the audience, but Cage's jaw clenched. He leaned forward, his voice steady but sharp. "You know, Joy, I've been doing this for decades. My hair, my choices, they're mine. Maybe you should try stepping into my shoes before you judge." The crowd gasped softly, and Whoopi raised an eyebrow, sensing the temperature rising. Joy, unfazed, tilted her head. "Oh, Nick, I'm just asking what the fans want to know." Cage's eyes flashed, and he shot back, "Fans want authenticity, not cheap shots." The audience erupted in cheers, but the air crackled with unease. Alyssa Farah Griffin tried to pivot, asking about his co-stars, but the spark had been lit. Cage, now animated, gestured widely, "I'm here to talk about art, not to be dissected like some tabloid headline." Joy chuckled, doubling down, "Well, you do give us plenty of headlines, don't you?" The crowd leaned in, hanging on every word. As the exchange teetered on the edge of chaos, Whoopi called for a commercial break, but the tension lingered, promising more fireworks when they returned. Back from the break, the studio lights seemed harsher, amplifying the charged atmosphere. Whoopi tried to reset the tone, asking Nicolas Cage about his passion for lesser-known films, hoping to steer things toward safer ground. Cage, still visibly bristling, leaned into the question with fervor, his hands gesturing animatedly as he spoke about discovering obscure cinema from around the world. "Film is a universal language," he said, his voice rising. "It's about connection, not tearing people down." The audience clapped, but Joy Behar, undeterred, leaned forward with a sly grin. "Connection, sure, but Nick, some of your choices like that vampire movie, come on, were you serious?" The crowd tittered, and Cage's face reddened. He gripped the armrests of his chair, his voice dropping to a low, intense growl. "Joy, you're missing the point. Every role I take is a piece of my soul. You think it's a joke? Try standing in front of a camera, bearing everything, knowing people like you are waiting to take a swing." The audience gasped, and Sunny Hostin jumped in, trying to defuse the situation. "Let's talk about your new film's message," she offered, but Cage wasn't done. "No, let's talk about this," he said, pointing at Joy. "You sit here, throwing zingers, but do you know what it takes to create something from nothing?" Joy raised her hands, mock defensive. "I'm just keeping it real, Nick." People loved the drama. The crowd buzzed, some cheering, others whispering nervously. Alyssa Farah Griffin tried to redirect, asking about Cage's work with charities, but he waved it off, his eyes locked on Joy. "You want real? Real is pouring your heart into a craft while folks like you reduce it to a punchline." Whoopi, sensing the spiraling tension, interjected with a laugh, "Okay, Nick, we get Ida, you're passionate. Let's cool it down." But Cage was in full swing now, his voice booming. I'm tired of people trivializing what I do. It's not just movies, it's my life. The audience erupted, some cheering his conviction, others stunned by his intensity. Joy, never one to back down, leaned in closer, her tone sharp. Nick, if you can't handle a little critique, maybe you're in the wrong business. The crowd oohed, and Cage's eyes widened, his hands slamming the table. Critique? That's not critique, yeah, that's mockery. The hosts froze, and the audience held its breath as the confrontation reached a boiling point. Whoopi clapped her hands, calling for another break, but the energy in the room was electric, with everyone waiting to see what Cage would say next. The camera lingered on his face, a mix of fury and passion. As the show cut to commercial, the show returned, and the audience was on edge, their whispers filling the studio as the hosts tried to regain control. Whoopi, ever the peacemaker, opened with a light-hearted comment about the heat of live TV, but her eyes darted between Nicolas Cage and Joy Behar, who sat with a defiant smirk. Cage, his posture rigid, stared straight ahead, clearly still fuming from the earlier exchange. Sunny Hostin took the lead, asking Cage about his influences growing up, hoping to shift the focus to something neutral. Cage softened slightly, recounting how watching classic films with his father shaped his love for storytelling. Those movies taught me that art can change lives, he said, his voice earnest but still tinged with frustration. The audience clapped warmly, but Joy couldn't resist. Okay, but Nick, some of those artistic choices like that B-movie, come on, what was that? The crowd laughed, but the jab landed hard. Cage's head snapped toward her, his eyes blazing. You keep bringing up my work like it's a joke, Joy. You don't get it. Every project, even the ones you mock, is a risk I take to push boundaries. Joy shrugged, unfazed. I'm just saying, Nick, not every risk pays off. The audience deserves to know why you pick these things. Cage leaned forward, his voice rising again. The audience deserves respect, not someone sitting here acting like they know my heart. The crowd roared, split between cheers and gasps. Alyssa tried to pivot, asking about his upcoming projects, but Cage was locked in. You want to talk about my choices? Let's talk about yours, Joy. How many times have you taken a cheap shot just for laughs? The audience erupted, and Whoopi raised her hands, trying to calm things down. Okay, let's keep it civil, she said, but Joy wasn't backing off. Nick, I'm doing my job asking the tough questions. If you can't handle it, that's on you. Cage's face tightened, and he stood up, pacing slightly, his voice booming. Your job is to tear people down for sport? I'm here to talk about my work, not to be your punching bag. The crowd went wild, some chanting his name, others stunned into silence. Sunny and Alyssa exchanged nervous glances, while Whoopi tried to steer back to the movie, but the clash was unstoppable. Cage pointed at Joy, his voice shaking with passion. I've given everything to this industry, and I won't let you reduce it to a soundbite. The tension was palpable, and as the show cut to another break, the audience buzzed with excitement, knowing this was a moment they'd be talking about for weeks. As the show resumed, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation, the audience hanging on every movement from Nicolas Cage and Joy Behar. Whoopi, visibly exasperated, tried to lighten the mood with a joke about how lively their debates always get, but her smile was strained. Cage sat back down, his expression a mix of defiance and exhaustion, while Joy adjusted her glasses, clearly ready for another round. Sunny Hostin, ever diplomatic, asked Cage about the challenges of balancing blockbuster films with smaller, indie projects. Cage seized the opportunity, his voice steady but intense, as he described the freedom of independent filmmaking. It's where I can take risks without a studio breathing down my neck, he said, his eyes flicking toward Joy. It's about telling stories that matter, not chasing headlines. The audience applauded, but Joy jumped in, her tone sharp. Nick, come on, some of those indie films barely see the light of day. Are you saying they're all masterpieces? Cage's hands clenched, and he shot back. I'm saying they're honest, something you might not understand, Joy, with your gotcha questions. The crowd gasped, and Joy's eyebrows shot up. Gotcha questions? I'm asking what people want to know, why you keep doing these wild projects. Cage stood again, his voice rising to a fever pitch. Because I believe in them. Because I'd rather fail on my own terms than play it safe for people like you. The audience erupted, some cheering wildly, others murmuring in shock. Alyssa Farah Griffin tried to interject, asking about his fans' support, but Cage was unstoppable. My fans get it. They know I'm all in, every time. You think you can sit there and judge my career? You don't know the half of it. Joy leaned back, crossing her arms. Nick, you're proving my point. You're so intense. It's like you're in one of your movies right now. The crowd laughed, but Cage didn't. He pointed at her, his voice booming. Maybe I am intense, but at least I'm real. At least I'm not hiding behind a desk, throwing shade for ratings. Whoopi clapped her hands, trying to regain control. All right, let's take a breath, people, she said, but the audience was eating it up, chanting Cage's name. Sonny tried to pivot to his philanthropy again, but Cage shook his head. No, let's finish this. Joy, you want to talk about my choices? Let's talk about why you feel the need to tear down artists instead of lifting them up. The crowd roared, and Joy's smile faltered for the first time. As the show cut to another break, the studio was alive with energy, the clash between Cage and Behar reaching legendary status. Returning from the commercial, the studio felt like a pressure cooker, with the audience buzzing and the hosts visibly on edge. Whoopi, trying to salvage the segment, opened with a plea for civility, her voice firm but warm. We're all passionate here, so let's keep it respectful, she said, glancing at both Nicolas Cage and Joy Behar. Cage, still standing, took a deep breath and sat down, his eyes never leaving Joy. Sonny Hostin jumped in, asking Cage about his dream role, hoping to shift the focus to something positive. Cage's tone softened as he spoke about wanting to play a complex historical figure, someone flawed yet inspiring. I want to dig into the humanity of someone real, he said, his voice earnest. The audience clapped, but Joy couldn't resist another jab. So, what? Another over-the-top performance. We've seen that, Nick, the crowd groaned, and Cage's face hardened. Joy, you keep coming at me like I'm some caricature. I'm an artist, not your punching bag. You don't get to define my legacy. Joy smirked, leaning forward. I'm not defining anything. I'm just saying what people see. You're larger than life, and sometimes it's too much. Cage's eyes flashed, and he stood again, his voice thunderous. Too much? You think creating something from nothing is too much? Try it sometime, Joy. Try putting your heart out there for the world to judge. The audience erupted, some standing in support, others whispering in shock. Alyssa tried to steer things back, asking about his work with young actors, but Cage waved her off. No, let's be real. Joy, you've been taking shots at me all day. Why? Because it's easy? Because it gets laughs? Joy shrugged, unfazed. It's my job to ask tough questions, Nick. If you can't handle it, that's not my problem. Cage's hands flew up, his voice shaking with passion. Your job is to provoke, not to understand. I've spent my life building something real, and I won't let you tear it down. The crowd went wild, chanting his name, while Whoopi tried to calm things down. Okay, Nick, we hear you. Let's talk about the movie, she said, but Cage was locked in, pointing at Joy. You want to talk about my work? Then talk about the effort, the sacrifice, not some cheap headline. Joy's smile tightened, and for a moment, she seemed caught off guard. The other hosts exchanged nervous glances, and as the segment neared its end, the tension was palpable. Whoopi signaled for a final break, but the audience was buzzing, knowing they'd witnessed a TV moment for the ages. As the show wrapped up, the studio was electric, the audience still reeling from the fiery exchange between Nicolas Cage and Joy Behar. Whoopi, desperate to end on a positive note, thanked Cage for coming and praised his passion, her voice tinged with exhaustion. Nick, you bring it every time, and we love that, she said, prompting applause. Cage nodded, his expression a mix of defiance and gratitude, but his eyes still burned with intensity. Sonny Hostin asked one last question about his advice for aspiring actors, and Cage's tone softened slightly. Be fearless, he said, his voice steady. Don't let any not critics, not talk show hosts tell you who you are. The audience cheered, and even Joy clapped, though her smile was tight. She leaned forward, trying to get the last word. "Nick, I respect your passion, but you've got to admit, you make it easy to poke fun sometimes." Cage's head snapped toward her, and the crowd held its breath. "Joy, I'd rather be a target for being real than play it safe and be forgotten," he shot back, his voice ringing with conviction. The audience erupted, some standing, others chanting his name. Alyssa Farah Griffin tried to wrap things up, thanking Cage for his honesty, but he wasn't done. "I came here to talk about my work, my art," he said, his hands gesturing wildly. "If that's too much for you, Joy, maybe you're not ready for the real thing." The crowd roared, and Whoopi quickly stepped in, laughing nervously. "All right, Nick, you've given us plenty to talk about. Thank you for being here." The hosts clapped, and the audience gave a standing ovation as Cage waved, his face a mix of fire and pride. Joy, for once, stayed quiet, her expression unreadable. As the cameras panned out, Whoopi reminded viewers to check out Cage's new movie, but the real story was the clash they just witnessed. The show ended with the audience buzzing, social media already lighting up with clips of the exchange. Cage's eruption had turned the segment into a viral moment, one that would be debated and memed for days. As the hosts waved goodbye, the tension lingered, a testament to the raw, unfiltered passion Cage brought to the table and the sparks that flew when Joy pushed him to the edge.